Use case. Heyo. Heyo. Okay. What's up, everyone? How y'all doing? Man, I haven't seen y'all in so long. I actually haven't really, because I'm in the space, but I ignore you. I see you when you're like up on the assistance thing, and I laugh to myself, and I'm just like, I won't help. I'm like, do you know in like the Lion King, with like when Scar's got Mufasa over the cliff? That's what I feel like. I'm like, I could, but I won't. Um, no, how's week 2 shaping up for y'all? Ooh, okay. Little thumbs. I saw a little bit of a grimace over there. It's it's a bunch of new stuff. It's like less JavaScripty stuff and more conceptual stuff, right? How are you feeling about your JavaScript like fundamentals? Do you feel like you're fluent in the language yet? No? Mhm. It would be a little arrogant. Yeah. I saw a thumbs up over there. Feeling good about the language? Very nice. I do want to make a point of just kind of mentioning that as we move forward with more like conceptual, like theoretical stuff, is going to tie back obviously to like the JavaScripty fundamentals of it. Like you're gonna learn about HTTP, or you have, or you're gonna learn about web servers, right? And you're gonna be writing that stuff in JavaScript. So if there's still like a little bit of iffiness about how to use objects or how to use callbacks, right? You've talked about callbacks, right? If there's still a little, about it, hit us up. Like we'll help you out with that. Because often, what I find is like the issue isn't even in the conceptual, like theoretical stuff. It's in the actual implementation of it. I don't want that to be a barrier for you. So let me know. And work hard to like identify where the issue is for you, whether it's in the understanding or whether it's in the coding of it. So today, we do this thing. Notes, MD. I'm doing a couple things, because the last time that you saw me, I wrote with a particular editor, which was Sublime, right? And the last time that you saw me, I was inside of Vagrant, and I'm not in Vagrant now. I'm using my own machine, because time has passed, and I'm not gonna. I don't like using Sublime. I don't like it. I don't like it at all. It's a great tool. It's really good. I just don't like it. I like VS Code. I like the little icons. I like the little icons that pop up when you have a file on the left hand here. So, just giving you a heads up. I, if you're not using VS Code and you're confused maybe by some of the things that I do, like just let me know, because sometimes I forget that not everybody uses VS Code. Right? Is that okay with everyone? Can I use VS? Awesome. I do also have Sublime. I'm just gonna refuse to use it. So, without further ado, today is week 2, day 2 lecture, week 2, day 2 lecture, and today's topic is, what is today's topic? Yeah, web servers. Servers. I have my little notes right here. Servers. Servers 101. Specifically, we're looking at a thing called Express. I'm going to give you a heads up. Today's lecture is built up of 2 parts. There's a first part, there's an intermission, and then there's a second part. You might also say, I guess it's 3 parts if you count the intermission as a part, but I'll say like most of the learning in the first part is conceptual, and the learning in the second part is practical, right? In the first part, I'm going to be talking about what the heck is a server, right? In the second part, I'm going to be talking about, all right, how do we make a server, whatever it is, right? In this first part, I'm going to be writing some code. The code I write in the first part, don't do it, okay? In the first part, I'm going to be writing a web server, again, whatever a web server is, using some tools that you don't use in bootcamp, right? I'm using these tools for a reason that's going to become clearer in a minute. In the second part, I'm going to be using Express. which, as we'll see, is a tool that you will use in bootcamp. You will use for your project. So this first part here, heavy focus on conceptual stuff, right? This part down here, a little bit of a preview to the tools that you're using for your project. Okay, so we're going to start off with a little bit of vocab before I even really kind of go deeper into this. I'm going to test some vocab. What did you learn yesterday? Okay, how to make a client? Sure. A client of like what? For requests. Okay. And what kind of requests? Get requests. Okay, what is a get requests? Is that a kind of request? Is it made with some kind of protocol? Yeah, there we go. What is that? HTTP. There we go. So pretend I don't know anything, right? So you learn how to make an HTTP client, right? Being one part of many transactions that communicates using the HTTP protocol, right? So you'd made something, or you worked on building something that communicates to something else using HTTP. What does HTTP stand for? Transfer and then protocol. All right. Hypertext transfer protocol. I'm going to focus on each of these words bit by bit. Hypertext. Hypertext. Hypertext is just special text. There's text, boring. That's old news. There's hypertext. Whoa, that's hypertext. It might have pictures in it. It might have, all sorts of stuff. Generally, if we talk about hypertext, it'll be like, oh, HTML maybe, right? Don't focus too much on this first part. This part here, though, transfer, right? We're talking about something that gives us some ability to transfer data back and forth between multiple people, right? Namely two, right? We'll have two things, and they'll be transferring data back and forth between each other. And this here, protocol, is, I think, the most important of the words, right? A protocol is like an agreement between multiple parties on how they're going to communicate and how they're going to be behaving around each other. I want to pull this idea, actually, for like a lot of this HTTP stuff, I like to pull it away from computers, right? And just think about like different people interacting with each other. So, as a scenario, you go out on a date and it goes really poorly, right? Like really, you just trip everywhere, you spill water, you tell really bad jokes and they don't laugh. You order like a burger and as you're eating it, it like falls apart and just all messy. At the end of it, you're like, oh, can you give me a ride home, by the way, also, because I don't have any bus fare. Like, you live on the other side of the city, okay, fine, all right. So it goes poorly. And you wake up the next day, and you're like, boy, that date went poorly. Like, that person probably doesn't want to see me again. And you text them like, hey, that was great. And then you call them and you're like, I love you, right? Is that according to protocol? No, right? That's not what we've agreed people should be doing, right? If it goes poorly, you cut. You go, sorry, and then you show up in the rain with flowers. No, okay. There's protocols. There's agreements between people on how they're going to be behaving with each other. In the same way, we don't want to surprise the computers, right? We don't want to surprise. If I'm a computer and there's a computer over there, want to go according to some rules. Now, a bunch of nerds get together on a mountaintop. They get together and they sit in a circle and they agree on a set of rules for how people should be communicating, right? How these two computers should be communicating, and they write it down, on a document, and they publish it and they call it HTTP 1.0. Right? Here we go. This is the hypertext transfer protocol, and we say that you can do these things. Right? I'm going to review the stuff that you learned yesterday. You can get things, you can post things, you can put things, and you can delete things. Right? And all this stuff is done to things. Anytime you want something, you say, I want that thing. And the other person says okay and serves it back to you. And HTTP is built up of requests and responses. Okay, so this is going to be really important. That whenever I'm saying get, post, put, delete, this here is a request. You can only get, post, put, delete when you're making a request. And in HTTP, every request, for it to be a full transaction, needs to have a response. Okay? And responses are built up of status codes. Okay? Status codes and often some data. Okay, so here, if I was to bring it back to the horrible date example, I'm going to try and like mash this into working as an analogy. It would be in the morning, I can make an HTTP request, get / another date, and then I would get a status code of like 401 forbidden or whatever. I said, hey KV, what's the forbidden status code? Is it 403? There are 403 forbidden, right? I make a request and I get a response, and now I'm going according to some protocol. Okay. I know that this was a little bit up in the air, but we're gonna see this kind of come down and crystallize into actual code soon. I want to do a little bit of more vocabulary here. HTTP is a blank 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 based protocol. Okay, so HTTP is a based protocol. What does the stand for? Oh, what was that? No, it's almost there. Res. Nope. So maybe this word was not used yesterday, and I feel rude. Wait, I heard whisperings there, though. No? No. It's a resource-based protocol, right? When we say get, post, put, delete, we're saying things. Can I get a dog, right? Can I post a food? You know, like things, resources. Okay, HTTP is a resource-based protocol. When we talk about resources, we're talking about things that are like nouns. But to be more concrete, like HTTP is used on the internet, right? To start off with, let's say it's used to like request web pages, right? I might be asking for a page, right? Like get me the HTML, the Wikipedia page about dogs, right? And that's an HTML document. It's a resource. It's a thing, right? I'm asking for one thing, right? Or I might be asking for some data, and that's something that you'll explore later in the boot camp. But again, I'm always asking for a particular thing. So when you find yourself writing HTTP requests, right, make sure that you have that clear in your head, like what is it the thing that I'm asking for, or what is the thing that I'm creating, right? Because that's at the heart of HTTP is the resources. Oops. Okay. HTTP is a stateless protocol. Stateless. What does stateless mean? Right. So if I was to bring it back up to this over here, get slash another date might not return 403 forbidden. It might go like, I don't actually know who this is, like new phone, who's this? Um, I need to say all of the important information as I send requests. I need to say, I want to make this request. Also, this is who I am. Okay? Because the server is not going to remember the order of requests, right? Because the server might be dealing with many requests coming in, right? So to make things easier for the server, right, what the HTTP protocol says is that every client has to send their identifying information with every request, right? That's what stateless is going to mean for us, is that the server is not going to keep track of how many requests the client has made or whatever. Like, they won't be able to even identify the client necessarily unless the client puts identifying information in there. Right? That's something that you're going to explore over the course of this week, is what it fully means for HTTP to be a stateless protocol. Right? Does that feel sort of clear for people, the statelessness of it? Right? If it doesn't, let me know, and we'll figure that out. Okay, so HTTP does not remember previous requests. So I'm just going to say everything the server needs should be sent with the request. Okay, so yesterday you started working on the GitHub downloader project. Boop. On the GitHub downloader project. You having a good time with that? Not really. Why?
It's just hard for me to conceptualize which function runs first.
Mmm.
The flow. I've tried talking to Matter before and I've
Mhm.
gotten it now, but it took me a really long time.
Yeah. Was that like everyone else's experience with it as well? Just the flow of the functions. Conceptually, do you understand what's going on?
Yeah.
Right, so your client, your client is making requests somewhere, right? Just into the ether. It's just shouting out into the void. And it's receiving responses. That's at the heart of HTTP, is that a client can make requests and it will receive responses, hopefully. Okay? And those responses will be formatted in a way that the client can interpret. And what that kind of depends on is the fact that these requests and these responses, okay, the requests are made by a client and the responses are served by some server, right? Somebody is replying. And that's, again, HTTP is built up of these two things, a request and a response. A request, as I set up here, is these things. A response is going to be some status code and often some data. When I say status code, I mean like 200, 404. These are status codes. Okay, so with the GitHub downloader project, we're making HTTP requests to what I'll call a black box, right? AKA magic. Because, like I said, you're just shouting out this stuff into the void, right? Get me the contributors to the jQuery project, right? Just get. And from somewhere, information is coming out. You're not writing the queries that go into the GitHub servers and, writing all the database stuff to go fetch things. You just ask a nice question and GitHub replies nicely. The issue, though, is that it is not very transparent as to what's going on inside, right? Inside of the thing that is hearing that stuff. So today, we open up that black box. Today you're going into back-end development, right? When we talk about front-end and back-end, right? I'm sure people have heard those terms before. Has anybody not heard back-end before? Cool. Okay, so when we talk about front-end and back-end, front-end is generally the place where people make requests. Backend is, generally speaking, the place where people receive requests and format responses to send out. So let me start by writing a bit of code here. We're going to take a new folder. Now I'm going to call this first demo, classic. And then in my terminal, I'm going to go to first demo. And what I'm going to do is I need to run this command here. In case you see me run this, I, on my computer, have to run this command if I want to use Node. You have Vagrant, and that's already set up. It's just the setup that I have forces me to do that. So I'm going to go npm init-y. Does anybody know what this does? Yeah, well, it initiates an npm project, right? So if I check to see what I have in my project at the moment with ls, I have nothing. What -y does is you go npm init and it'll ask you a bunch of questions. -y just says say yes to all those questions, right? So I get myself a nice package JSON, right? And package JSON just means now I can install things in here, right? I can keep track of the dependencies. What I'm going to do in here now is make myself a file. I'm going to call this one maybe server.js. Name does not matter, right? This is just a node file, right? What happens if I go node server.js right now? Nothing. It's just a node file. I throw in a console log. Okay. I always just test to make sure that I get hello out, and I'm like, all right, we're good to go. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put this on the same page so I don't have to go back and forth all the time. Zoop. Okay. Okay. Is this still fairly visible for people? If it's not, I'll just change it up. Okay, so what I'm going to do is inside of this file here, I'm going to say let http equal require http. What does this line do? It lets me access the HTTP library. Right. Now, did I ever go npm install HTTP? I didn't. So the HTTP library is built into Node. I have access to that. It's one of those preloaded libraries. Let HTTP require HTTP. Now, you used this before. I think you used the HTTPS version for making some stuff before you hopped into the GitHub downloader. And what you used it for was to make requests. I'm going to use this library now to make a server that accepts requests. I just want us to see what's in here first. Console.log HTTP. And now when I run this, node server, I get back a bunch of trash. Just a bunch of stuff. Because the HTTP library is really some gigantic object with all sorts of stuff in here. Client request, agent. Like, my eyes are just, ugh. And then I see all these familiar things here. What are these? I see status codes, and they're saved somewhere. Right? This is my favorite one. That's a real status code. You use it if your thing is a teapot. You know? So there's all these status codes. Here's 200 OK. So the HTTP library is just a big object, right? And this is what I mean when I say, like, you have to get comfortable with the fundamentals of JavaScript, like dealing with objects, right? How do I access things inside of objects? Well, I have to go dot, right? And something that I might notice is that inside of the HTTP object, there's a function called create server, right? Now, here, oh, there we go. This was when I originally printed out the entire HTTP object. Notice how there's create server in here, right? So I can isolate just that one function by going http dot create server, right? It's a function, and I'm going to do something interesting with it. What the create server function does, and here I want to highlight again, I don't want you to understand this code because you're not using this tool, right? I'm using it for illustrative purposes, right? But what I'm using this function for right now is I'm going to create a server, right, as the create server function, might do. And what I'm going to do with it is I'm going to pass it something like this. What am I doing right now? What does this mean? Have you ever seen something written like this before? And what is it? Mm-hmm. There you go. It's taking in a callback as a parameter, right? I could have done this and written this way instead. Okay? I could have done this. What I really want you to get from this, and this is an idea that's going to translate over into the tool that you will be using, right, is that you will be making heavy use of callbacks, right? I want you to feel comfortable with that. A callback is really an action that I'm registering somewhere, and I'm telling somebody else, hey, use this action eventually, right? Here's some code that I'm going to write, console.log hello. And when I start my program, this callback doesn't actually run. I just pass it to create server, and I don't know, I didn't write this function, the create server function, but there might be a chance that at some point create server will run this callback. That's one of the things about callbacks is you're giving up control. You make a function, you give it to someone, and you tell them, hey, run this eventually. So I will be writing this stuff inline from now on. But let me know if it gets confusing and we can split it up. So the create server function takes a callback, and the callback's going to be formatted like this. It's going to be formatted as a request. Whoops. Oh no, it's locked. It's going to be formatted as a request and a response. I don't know why this thing got so long. There you go. As a request and a response in the parameters. Because that's what HTTP is made up of, right? A request comes in and a response is sent out. So we'll have access to in here is supposedly the request. Now, having written this right now, I will come back to this in a second. But what I'm going to do is tell the server to start listening. And I'll tell the server to start listening on some number, like 8080. I've just picked a random number. Here, I'll do leet, actually, 1337. Some random number. And then I'm going to give it another callback. Now, oh, that's why, because I was zoomed in. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and run this code again. Right? I have this code that makes a server, and I have this code that tells the server to listen, and I run it. And what does it do? It says, I am listening, and it's just hanging. It's just waiting. Notice that I didn't go back to my prompt. I can't ls. I can't do things. The program's just waiting. Because that's what listen does. Server.listen tells the program, keep running. Right? Keep running. Now, you'll notice I also have, this console log request. Let's see what happens when I make a request to my server. My server is running at localhost 1337. Right, that's the number that I picked. And what I can do now is go to the browser. and make a request to localhost 1337. And I want you to notice that when I make this request, this thing just keeps spinning. There's a difference between this and, say, if I went to some other number, like localhost 1234. This just immediately stops and says that the site can't be reached. But when I'm doing 1337 now, that other number that I picked, it hangs. So it's made a request, but it's not receiving a response is the thing. So it recognizes the fact that there is somebody on the other line, right? So unlike my 1234, there was nobody on the other line, so it immediately went, I couldn't find it. Here, it's now just waiting for a response. If I go check my code, at no point do I tell my server to send a response. Right? That's my fault. I didn't write that code. But what I want you to see is that we can track these steps. I've made a request. Now this thing here says console log request, and I might go check to see what's in my console. I have this whole new object, and this is a request object. Right? This is the entire request that has been sent. If I go through here, I see all sorts of information. There's information like, the browser that it, was sent. Not the browser. The browser that sent the request in the first place. What version of HTTP am I using? And I'll also notice things like, where are you at? Where are you at? Headers. There we go. Also notice this here. What? It's a URL slash and a method get. And I'm going to do something else now. I'm going to go to the URL slash dogs. Let me make this request. Again, I'm not getting a response back. But if I go in here and I search up now, what I might be surprised to find is URL dogs method get. So that stuff is being received by the server. Right? The stuff that I've sent from the browser, my node server now, my node server here has received that. And I could do things like, hey, instead of console logging request, what if I console log just, and as we saw, that's an object, so I could go console log the method, or console.log the URL. Right? Just the method and just the URL. And I'm going to have to now restart my server. Every time I make changes to my server code, I need to restart it. So I made some changes, I've restarted, and now I go ahead and I make a request to 1337/dogs. And what I get over here is get/dogs. I'm going to make another request here to cats, and another one to potato. And I look over in the console and I get /cats and /potato. Right, so we've set something up that's listening. The other end of the thing is sending a response. Oops. Let me just try this real quick. I'm going to restart my server. I might have gotten this wrong. I always get it wrong on the first try. Oh, I didn't. Nice. So now I've just set it up so that when I make a request to anything, it just says OK. Right? Notice it's not hanging anymore. Right? Because I've completed that life cycle. I've made a request has been processed, and then I send back a response. And the code that I used right now was response.end. Right? I again want to stress, you're going to be writing slightly different code because you'll be using a different tool for this, right? You'll see why in a minute. Now, with this thing here, the HTTP server that I can make, I can set all kinds of stuff. I can go response.statuscode equals 200 if I wanted to send that back. And I can say, instead of OK, say, what up? Or bird up. Does anybody here watch Eric Andre? No? Oh, man. Good comedian. That's weird stuff. Don't watch it. It's it's really weird. Say, what up? Now I'm going to restart my server here. I'm listening, and I make my requests, pineapple, and I get what up. Not a huge surprise, but I'm going to show you a tool here called Postman. Now, you've used curl, right? You used curl yesterday. Did you like curl? Yeah, I don't like it either. It's garbage. No, okay, so curl is cool. You can do a lot of stuff with it, and you can test out your HTTP requests, with that. I tend to just forget how to use curl. Like, I just tend to forget how to, the different commands and the flags you have to put in. So instead here, it's essentially a GUI for curl, right? It's like a visual interface for curl. If I want to make a GET request, I can go GET localhost, and then I said it's on 1337/dogs. Let me do something different. Rain, just so that we see the difference there. I send, and what I get back is what up. Right? Again, it's just curl, except instead of having to write all the commands, you can click things and set stuff in here. Right? And now over in my terminal, I've got get rain. And then here's one, localhost. I'm going to do potato, and I'm going to say delete the potato. Right? Send. And I still got back what up. And over on the terminal side, it wasn't get anymore, it was delete potato. Right? So through the browser, for now, the only things that you can do are test get requests. Right? Because the only place where you, for right now, can write your HTTP requests are in here. And through this thing, by default, it's a get. So if you want to test your puts and your deletes, right, and your posts, test them using something like curl or Postman. Okay, so I've got method, I've got the URL. I said I was sending back a status code, right? So let me just change the status code here to 418, right, just to show you that we can set the status code ourselves if we wanted to. And I'm going to go delete potato, send, and the status code that I got back is 418. I'm a teapot. Right? So we have full control over that. Server receives something, does stuff, and then sends it back. The interesting bit is what happens in between. That's the interesting bit. Right? We've been talking about the edges of the pipeline here. We'll talk about the middle bit. So if I have access to this method and to this URL, let me just save those things. Okay. Before I continue, are people comfortable with what const means? Is there anybody who is not comfortable with that? Okay. So method and URL, I'm saving them in a variable. And you know what? After I console log, what I'm going to do, let me just zoop. What I'm going to do is I might write an if-else statement. I might write some conditional stuff, such as if method equals get, then do a thing, else do another thing. Right? I might say if method equals get, then set the response status code to 200 and say that was a get request. Otherwise, set the response to 418 and say that wasn't a get request. Right? And I've written some conditional stuff now. So now my requests don't all get handled in the same way. And what I'm going to see is when I restart my server, and I'm going to be using Postman from now on for this, or for like a little bit. When I make a GET request to localhost 1337, I get back that was a GET request. And when I make a PUT request, maybe, I get back that wasn't a GET request. Right. I've done some conditional stuff. Right? I can do anything. I can be conditional on any of the things that come in through that request object, including maybe stuff on the method on the URL. Right? Maybe like, oh, if the URL is /dogs, I could end my response with, you want dogs? And maybe I'll do, oh, if the URL is Kanye, I'll respond with easy. And then I might finish off with an else statement that says response and literally anything else. So now I have conditions on both the methods and conditions on the URLs. What I want you to get from this is just the fact that this looks horrible. This looks like a trash fire, right? Like I'm writing. Can you imagine making a website out of something like this, like trying to stitch together if statements, right? And I'm not even doing anything funky yet, right? But it's a trash fire. It's horrible. Let me restart this just to see what happens. If I start making requests to Pineapple, I get literally anything else. Dogs is you want dogs, and Kanye is easy. Right? And that's what I'm getting back. Now, we probably haven't been on many websites that are just text like this. Your websites are usually sending back something else. Often there'll be HTML pages, right? Often your websites will have some form of actual content that you're seeing. So what I might do here is make myself a new file called kanye.html, and my HTML here is just going to be an H1. It says welcome to kanye.com. And this is going to be an H2. It says the world's premier site for Kanye news. Right? And then I might have some information or whatever. Actually, let me grab a Kanye picture real quick. So I have this Tumblr. It's not mine. Like it's bookmarked. So just in case I need a quick Kanye image. So here we go. So here's Kanye HTML, and maybe I want this thing not to respond with easy, but send back the Kanye HTML page. Right? There's a website. It should have HTML pages being served up. I need some way to grab the HTML page and send that HTML page. So if I want to grab the HTML page from my files, right, there's a special library in Node that lets me do that. You might have already played around with it. It's the file system library, right? Has anybody here played with the file system library just yet? There you go, right? So I'm going to use exactly that and go let fs equals require fs, and then I'll go let the home page, not home page, Kanye page equal, and then I'm going to use the file system library to read that Kanye.html page, right? To read that in and put it in a variable. And then what I'm going to do here is when I want to send that Kanye page, instead of saying response and Yeezy, I'm going to say response set the header. So do you remember responses have, and this is something I guess I didn't write in here, responses have status codes and then headers that often include some data. So I'm going to set a header. I'm going to set a header, and the header is going to say that the content type that's going to be sent back is not going to be text, because text is default. Instead, the content that I'm sending back is text/HTML. And the response that I'm sending is not going to be the word Yeezy. It's instead going to be the Kanye page. And I go ahead and I restart my server. And I go to, let's do dogs real quick. And it says you want dogs, anything. And it says literally anything else. And if I go Kanye, I get back, welcome to Kanye.com. Right? And the cool thing about this is notice that this is formatted as HTML. Right? This is HTML. And I just want us to see this in Postman real quick. If I make myself a GET request to Kanye, what I get back is a bunch of HTML. And I can check the headers, and the headers will say content type, text HTML. What can we write in the headers? Are we limited by what the nerds at the HTTP consortium or whatever told us we can do? No. Never let nerds rule your life. You can do whatever you want. Let me set a header, best header to Nima. Right? I don't have any friends in the HTTP world, right? But what in the headers? Arbitrary key value pairs. I heard Carl talk about this yesterday. It's like objects, just storing values, keys and values. Okay, we're gonna take a short break in a second. Right after I reiterate the fact that this is garbage. This is horrible. Oh my god, right? People making websites all the time. Why would we make do people really have to write all this stuff? Nested if statements. Ugh. What if I wanted to make a request like dog's German Shepherd? Did I spell shepherd wrong? Nice. Right? And then also another one that was dogs like Pomeranian and dogs Chihuahua. Do I have to write each one of those out by hand? There's got to be a better way. Right? And we'll see the better way. So anything else that I want to add here? Not really. This sucks. So we're gonna take a 10-minute break, and at 10:05 we'll continue on. Does that sound good? Wait, are there any questions? Yes.
Say your Kanye file had was a bunch of files all linked and you needed all of them to display.
Mm-hmm.
Page. How would you set it to one variable and link all those pages within, or do you link that folder?
You would have to manually do that stitching together. In this case here, you would have to write some code that is able to take half an HTML page and another half of an HTML page and stitch them, right? And I'm sure you can imagine the amount of work that would take. And that's using the thing that I've shown you right now, the HTTP module for making servers with create server. And this is like a raw server. Okay? But we're going to see after the break is somebody's built some stuff that does everything that you've just asked, right? And a bunch of other stuff and packaged it together in one module. And that's what you're going to use. Okay, so at 10:06 we'll continue. That answered your question though, right? Cool, cool. Right. When we left off, I had left off with this horrible mess, and I'd said there's got to be a better way, right? And generally in the world of code, anytime somebody says that there's got to be a better way, the answer is yeah, there is, right? Because you're not unique. You're the least special people on the planet as web developers. There's so many of us. Really, any problem you run into, somebody else has run into, and they'll have fixed it. Right? That's why I fully encourage you as developers to like look beyond, right, and find third-party stuff. Again, though, like for like the assessment test or whatever, I don't want you to Google the answers. Not that kind of look beyond. But just don't reinvent the wheel if you don't have to. So what we're looking for is so HTTP create server is garbage. What we're gonna do instead is use an abstraction. Express. Okay, so I want to kind of talk about this word abstraction a little bit. An abstraction for me means, oh no, this is a problem. You just get a little bit further away from the problem. Look how far away from the problem I am now. It's been abstracted. Okay? But often I'll need somebody to pull me away from that problem, right? And hide that problem a little bit. That's an abstraction. Express says all those horrible if statements, garbage. Let's get rid of that stuff. If statements. Instead, what I would like to do is maybe make a list that says, hey, if you make a GET request to /dogs, do this. If you make a POST request to /dogs, do this other thing. And let me just, if you make a GET request to Kanye, do this other thing. Do you see how like there's no weird nesting, right? I know I use the word if, but like, let me even just get rid of that. Right? We're essentially in this style of what I've written, I'm listing out a bunch of routes, right? Like a bunch of little paths that a request can go down, and telling it to do some particular thing, right? I'm almost declaring it, right? So y'all watch The Office? You know when Michael declares bankruptcy? He's like, I declare bankruptcy. I declare that a GET request to dogs does this, right? Like I'm declaring it. Right? I declare that a GET request to Kanye does this other thing. Right? So, Express is a fast, unopinionated, minimalist web framework for Node.js. None of these words really mean anything to us at the moment except for fast and maybe web framework. Minimalist is going to mean that there's very little that Express requires you to do. Right? We're going to see that the code for request is barely there. Unopinionated means that request does not care what you do with that Express does not care what you do with it. Right? It doesn't care how you're going to use it. And web framework is going to mean that they've built up a bunch of code that you can use to build stuff. Right? This is going to be a library that I bring in that has some particular structure in the way that I use it. That's what a framework is going to mean. A library that has some structure in the way that we use it. To install it, I'm going to go npm install. So let me just make a new folder, second demo here. New folder. I'm going to do that whole npm init again. Npm init -y. And what I'm going to do is npm install Express. Because it's an npm module that I can install. Npm install Express. If I check my second demo here now and make myself server.js maybe. Right, server.js. I will have access to Express. Right? And again, my tick is that I need to console log this stuff and just see what it is. Again, some big object. Right? So I'm bringing in Express, and it's just some big object with a bunch of stuff in it. Right? It looks different than that HTTP object that I made before, or gotten before. So Express, before I even start writing any code, Express is going to be good for, let's say 2 things. Like there's 2 things that make it really good. The first one is routing, meaning that with Express it's going to be fairly simple to read the way that Express can set up these things. Get request to /dogs, post request to /dogs. Right? Whereas the code that we'd written before, I don't know what this does. I have to like make my way down the if statement to understand what's happening. Express is going to be nice in the way for writing out those routes. And Express is going to have a thing called middleware. And what middleware means is anything that we need to happen between receiving the request and sending out the response. So we'll be able to write little functions or little things to kind of snap into that pipeline. Right? And you're going to see that Express makes it like legible and a bit clearer on how to kind of set that up. So in my server code here for Express, this is what I'm going to do. I've brought it in Express. I'm going to say, let's make an app. Or you know what, let me call this server instead. Make a server. This is kind of like create server from before, right? Kind of. And then I'm going to say something like server.get server.get to / call this callback. Right now I'm just console logging request, and then I'm going to say server.listen some other port. I'm going to pick 8080. Generally you'll be working on 8080 or 8000 or 3000. The numbers don't actually make a difference. Listen on that port and call this callback. Okay, this is all the code at the moment. Get / does this. I'm going to go ahead and start my server. Again, very similar to what I did before. It just says I'm listening and it hangs. And what I'm going to see now is when I make a GET request to it hangs, and over here it console logged that request. Right? Because I never told it so far to send a response back. Right now, I just want us to take a look at this request. Right? It's similar to what we had when we were doing the other one before, but it's got a bit of a different structure. I can still see URL and method. Right? I think it's actually like mostly the same, to be honest. But the important thing is that anytime I receive a request, I want to send a response. I'm going to go response, and then here I'm going to say send. I know before I was writing code that said end, but Express wants me to write code that says send. I'm just gonna say send, a lamau, right? Just some random text. Whoops. Ah. I'm gonna restart. I'm gonna make that request. And I got a lamau. Now, the reason that I'm showing you all of this is not just to go over the same idea again, but the fact that making now another route is a matter of just setting up another one of these server gets. Right? Do you see how this is more legible than what we had before? Right? We're declaring a couple routes. Server get dogs does this. Right? And if I want to make a delete route, server delete. Right? So Express gives us this setting up the routes becomes much easier than it would have been if we were doing this whole nested if scenario. Right? That's one thing. It'll also allow us to do things like this. Dogs slash, and then I wrote colon dog name. I have essentially put a parameter into this route. This will catch anything that says dogs slash spot. Dogs slash, anybody got a dog here? Yeah. Frida. Like Frida? Yeah. Right? Dogs slash Bartholomew. Right? It's classic dog names. Dog slash, I want to meet a dog named Richard. This is going to match anything that fits that pattern. And just to test that out, I'm going to restart my server. I'm going to say dogs slash Frida. Oh, whoops. I'm sorry, I tried to delete Frida. Get dog slash Frida. It says you want dogs. And if I do dog slash something else, this eldritch, dog name, so you want dogs. Right? If I did something like potato slash this other thing, that route is not matched. Right? I even get an error back that says you cannot get potato. Right? You can't do it. So I've got this patterning here. And what if I wanted to use those values? Well, I have access to that in here under console log request params. Right? So if I was to hop into what was being console logged, I'll notice that if I took the time to just kind of dig through this, eventually I would find a property that says params. And what's params pointing to? It's pointing to an object. Right? Params is a property in the request object that points to yet another object. Request.params. So if I was to just restart this and run, then when I get over here is dog name Frida. Right? Meaning that I might be able to go request.params.dogname. Does this make sense to people? Right? Now I'm making some dynamic server code. I got back Frida. I'm going to do this with Bartholomew. Is that how you spell Bartholomew? That's a weird name. That's a good point. Or Bartholomew the Apostle. Okay. That's not what I meant, but Bartholomew. Right? And what I'm getting over on this side here is console logging the name. Right? So I want you to start imagining all the funky things that you could do with something like this. Right? We're gonna build a funky thing. Now, so far I have just been sending some stuff. Let me get a little bit funkier. I'm gonna go dogs is some object, and it's gonna have, I'm gonna hard code a bunch of dogs. So Frida, and it's gonna have Spot, and it's gonna have Bartholomew. Right? And they're all gonna have data. What kind of dog is Frida? What's that? Golden Lab. And I'm gonna say favorite food. It's hard. What's that? Chicken necks? Okay. And favorite Kanye album. Probably Yeezus, right? Yeah. Spot. I'm gonna say Spot is a is a dog. Oh, it's a pug. I'm like breed dog. Favorite food. Spaghetti. And then favorite Kanye album. This one's gonna be College Dropout. Classic. And then Bartholomew. Breed. This is a greyhound. Favorite food. This is probably going to be beluga caviar. And then favorite Kanye album. This is hard. I watched The Throne. Right. Bartholomew is refined, very particular tastes. So here's all the info about the dogs. And what I'm trying to do here is maybe instead of sending back a message like you want dogs, maybe I want to send back that particular dog's like info, right? Now, it might make sense for me to send this back as a JSON object. And you've talked about JSON at this point, correct? Right? JSON is just a string representing a bunch of data. I could do it by setting the headers that are like for the response to application JSON, and I know that's something that Carl talked about yesterday, right? Am I wrong about that? No? So he said the words application JSON at some point? So what I'm going to do instead is just use the response.json method and tell it to return back the dog that matches that name. And what I'm going to see now is when I restart the server, when I ask for Bartholomew, I get back Greyhound, Beluga, Caviar, and Watch the Throne. I ask for Frida, lo and behold, I get a whole bunch of other data. Right? But notice the minimal amount of code that I have to do that. I had to write to do that. Right? That's the cool thing about Express is that I can pull this out by going request params dog name. Right? You're going to be making something similar to this over the course of this week. With Tiny App, similar. Is there any questions about this so far? Right. I actually don't know what would happen if I went send. So I'm just going to test it. Instead of JSON. Oh, okay, I guess it just figures it out. That's cool. I'm still going to say JSON. Just because it's legible to me. I'm sending back some JSON data. The reason that I want to do that is because I want to get into I want to lightly talk about something called a view. So what we did earlier was if I wanted to show like an HTML page, I had to bring in the file system module and read that file. Right? Let's quickly get Kanye server dot. Let's quickly get that Kanye page to work. Okay, that Kanye page that I made before. I would like to, like I did before, say get the Kanye page and send the Kanye page. So in Express I get to use these things called views. Now, you're going to learn more and more about this week. A view is basically an HTML page that I want to use as the response that gets sent back. Now, the thing about the thing about these views is that they can be dynamic. Right? The HTML pages that I want to go to, they shouldn't just be looking like this. I want to see a page for, Bartholomew. I want to see a page for Bartholomew that shows this information. So, using a thing called called EJS, I'll be able to npm install EJS. Right, so the assignments will work you through this. npm install EJS, and then I'm going to tell my server to set what's called a view engine. And what this means is anytime I want, I can now do response.render a particular page. Now, Kanye page in this directory right now does not exist. There's no Kanye page here. But I want to show you what happens when I try to use Kanye page and it doesn't exist. So I'm going to go to /Kanye. And I get back an error that says failed to look up the view Kanye page in the views directory underneath second demo /views. So EJS is going to expect you to have a folder called views. It's going to expect you to have that. And once you have a folder called views, it's going to expect you to have a folder called a file called kanyepage.ejs. Right? It's going to expect that. What am I getting now? Blank page. Because that's the page that I said it should send back. Is a blank page. And if I start writing stuff on here, I get that stuff. Right? Notice that when I change the EJS stuff, I don't need to restart my server, right? Only when I change my JavaScript. If I change my EJS stuff here, I'm fine. So what I'm going to do is take that entire Kanye page from before and just paste it in under Kanye page EJS. And now I've got that as my page. Yes. Right. So when you say it automatically knows, who's the it? Okay, so right, so these files are just text files, right? If I call it .ejs, express, when I say render and then the name, it knows to go look underneath views / Kanye page .ejs. It will like append that stuff, right? It's just because most of the time you're going to be writing files all in the same place, right? They wanted to keep this as small as possible, and you can just say the name of the file without EJS on it. If I had named my file kanyepage.html, it wouldn't find it. Okay, I'm going to go kanyepage .html. Now when I refresh, it doesn't find it because it's looking for something in views called kanyepage.ejs. Right. So I'm just going to rename that again here. Right. And the reason I'm showing you this is because now what we're going to do is have this work, but with the dogs. Right? We had those Kanye page. I'm going to go dogs page, EJS. Right. Here's some dog stuff, and I'm going to hard code some things. This is slash. I'm going to hard code a bunch of stuff. What did I have? Spaghetti. And then, oh no. Spaghetti was the food. Greyhound. And then over here, it was Watch the Throne. Oh, was it? How could I forget? Beluga caviar. Right. I've just hard coded a bunch of information for the dogs page. And what I'm going to do now is on the server side of the second demo, instead of response JSON dog, I'm going to write response render dog page, dogs page, because that's what I'd called it. I've also noticed that I didn't put name in here, so I'm just going to go name Frida, name Spot, and name Bartholomew. Okay, because what's going to happen now is anytime I make a GET request to one of those dogs, I get this page. Every single time, no matter what the dog is, right, Spot, same page every time. But I want to make this page dynamic. So I'm gonna throw something at you. It's gonna be nuts. I can pass in stuff in here. I've made a variable called some stuff, and I've passed it as the second parameter to render. Okay? I'm going to show you some stuff that might make sense, might not. Right? It's totally fine. I just want you to have been exposed to it as you work forward with the assignments. I'm passing this object. This is an object as the second parameter here. Over on the dogs page, what type of file is this? It's an EJS file. It's not an HTML file, meaning that there's special things that I can do in this. Let me put this right here as an H1 so we can see it. Okay, I'm going to restart the server. What? And a hush falls over the crowd. I wrote hello here. But what I got in the page was world. Why? No, so it didn't hide anything. The word world is not on here. The word world was over here in the object that said hello maps to world. Okay? We call this template variables. Often you're going to see it written as template vars like this. And it's going to allow me to pass data into a view. Okay? It's going to allow me to pass data into a view. So over on the dogs page, right, all of that data is going to be visible. So if I passed in some data called hello, I can use it on the dogs page within these weird tags. Weird tags. This is what I'll call an EJS tag. It'll open up with the angle percent and it'll end with percent angle. And the equal sign here says whatever the output of this thing is, draw it on the screen. Right? Like put that in the HTML. Because an EJS file is used to create an HTML response. Right? EJS file might have lots of little spots where you can put in data, right? And then it gets baked into an HTML file that gets sent out. So, hello here, I get back world. The interesting thing about EJS is that you can do any JavaScript stuff. 1 plus 2 plus 3. What I end up seeing on the screen is 6. So, you can write single JavaScript expressions here. I'm going to show you something that's a little nuts. I can go I can do this. What have I done here? I've written some kind of for loop, right? This looks like just a regular JavaScript for loop. This looks like the ending to that for loop, just the curly brace. But I've embedded it into my EJS, right? What do you think EJS stands for? It's embedded JavaScript. Take some JavaScript and I embed it into an HTML file, right? And that JavaScript's going to run to generate more HTML. It's a bit of a funky thought. So right now I'm saying from I equals 0 while I is less than 10, keep making H1 tags. And what I should see when I refresh this over here is a heck of a lot of H1 tags, right? This is cool. This is really cool. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take this code and just remove it for right now. I'm going to put it in the notes. Here's something else that I'm going to do. I'm going to take this. I'm going to put this in the notes as well. I'm going to put this one right above it. Okay. Now, my dogs page, I want to have maybe a dog name, right? I want to have maybe a dog food. Oh wait, no. This was dog breed, dog food, and maybe also like a dog album. And this would here dog name. Now, these things, all these, can I? All these should be preceded by the EJS tags and end off with EJS tags. Right? Dog name, dog breed, dog album, dog food. What I'm going to notice is if I just have this like this right now, I'm going to get errors. I'm going to get an error. It's going to say, I have no idea what dog name is. Dog name's not defined. Right? I'm showing you this error because you're going to run into it a million times. What this means is that I'm writing something in my EJS that hasn't been passed down as template variables. I've written dog name, but if I look at my template variables, all I have is hello world. If I went dog name is Spot, now I'm going to see that when I restart my server and refresh, the error that I get is not an error on dog name, but it's an error on dog breed. So this here it's something that KV talked about earlier, I think last week. It's error-driven development. I'm causing errors for myself, right? Just to really understand what's going on. And what I'm going to do is just go through and just say, okay, well, dog name, dog breed, this was dog food, and this is dog album, right? And just make sure that I've got this stuff coming out right. So Chihuahua, food is lasagna, and album is graduation. Restart my server, refresh, and I should see all of that data being in here. I've still hard-coded this stuff. Still hard-coded it in the template variables. So instead what I might do is say, okay, well, let's put the dog name to be the dog.name. Let's put the dog breed to be the dog breed. So this would breed, favorite food, and favorite Kanye album. So now I'm constructing this page using data. If I look up Spot, I get Pug, Spaghetti, College Dropout. I look up Frida, I get Golden Lab, Chicken Necks, and Yeezus. Notice that the name changes. And if I look up Bartholomew, I get all this other info. I know this might be like a bunch to just kind of toss at you, right? We started off talking about a server receives requests, sends back responses. Now I'm constructing those responses. But what I want you to see is that from the JavaScript side here, it's fairly clean. I've written when the server gets a GET request to this route, do this stuff, which involves rendering a page with this data. Right? Does this make sense to people? Right? At a conceptual level? I mean, obviously, you need to get your hands wet with it. You know, really, feet wet? You don't get your hands wet. You get your hands dirty and you get your feet wet. You need to get your hands dirty. You need to like hop into this and really play around with it before it fully clicks. I want to show you one last kind of thing here. I'd use the word middleware earlier. Middleware. It's everything that happens between receiving the request and sending out the response. We've technically done a little bit of middleware here, right? Which was, and I hadn't explicitly said that this is what it is, it was this. We'd set this EJS thing to happen in between requests and responses. Right? Notice that it's one line, set, and I've pumped some stuff in there. So we can write our own middleware. You can, in the same way that you can add get and deletes, and you can do posts and puts, all the stuff you want. I can go server use, and use is going to be saying you can do any kind of request, whether it's a get or a anything, to any route. So use is going to say run this function every time. I still get request. I still get response. And now we get access to a thing called next. I've made a little bit of middleware that console logs whoop whoop every time somebody makes a request. It just goes whoop whoop, and that's it. So now, regardless of what request happens, I get whoop whoop out. Right? Maybe you can think of some useful things for middleware, right? Today it might be a little tough to have this stuff solidified, but I just want you to know that we can think of this whole express situation as a pipeline. Request comes in and response comes out, and you can do stuff somewhere in the middle. Yes?
That what they might have used when they're doing like their food order, someone's food order comes in, that's what sends the alert to
Sure, maybe, right? If it happens somewhere in the middle, yeah. I might use this for things like counting the amount of requests that have been made, right? Or, often, if you look up Express middleware, right, you'll be able to find some nice middleware for various purposes, such as Morgan. So, here is some Express middleware called Morgan. And what we do with Morgan is we install it. Just want to make sure that I'm installing it properly. Yeah. We can install this thing called Morgan. And I'll show you what Morgan does in a second. Const Morgan equals require Morgan. And what we're going to see is I can use Morgan Express Morgan. Trying to find the correct way of using it. Sorry. There we go. I can say something like, see, I wrote server use this thing. I could also say server, server use Morgan, and Morgan's going to take some parameter, tiny, for example. What Morgan does is it sets itself up so that, accidentally ran the wrong command. It also sets itself up so that every time there's a request, it console logs out a printout of that request. It's nice and useful, right? It's logging, right? Notice I didn't write anywhere in my code to print this out. I just told it to use Morgan that does it. Right? Is that a question over there? Yeah. So something that I encourage you to kind of think about is how do you write more dynamic stuff? Like I loosely wrote this to loop over. Right? But what other kinds of loops can you do? Right? That's something to think about. Other thing, and I'll give you links to the documentation where you can read about this more. So you will find middleware, and you'll be instructed to use middleware over the course of the project. And it'll work by going thing.use and then you snap in something. And different middleware is going to have different configuration or whatever, but it ends up essentially being something like this whoop whoop function that I made. Right? Now, you might have noticed that when I paste things in, it often comes in as app.use. Right? And I've had to go through and change this to server. So, in the world of Express, it's convention to call the server app. Right? So I'm just going to go through and just rename all my server instances here to app. Like, that's just convention. It doesn't actually change your code, but it's convention to go app instead of server. Are we comfortable with that? Okay. The other thing is that you'll often online see, as you're looking for app.get function, this thing will be written instead of request and response, it'll be written as req and res. Right? That's also just convention. You could call these anything, like Drake and Kanye, like whatever you want, as long as you're consistent. For lectures, I tend to write it out as request and response. Even when I write code, sometimes I tend to do this just because it's clear to myself that these two things are different. Because REQ and RES are really similar, and it's easy to make a mistake and get them backwards. Because there are different things that I can do with a request than what I can do with a response. Is that clear to people? Right? Also just a naming thing. So I would have to do this. Right? Express developers just like to use as few letters as possible. That's it. Cool. So that's about it as far as information that I want to kind of toss at you. You know, it's going to take a little while to digest. Are you feeling hyped to hop into back-end development? Yeah. Woo, yeah. Oh my God. Yeah, we're going to make websites about Kanye West. If I had full control over the curriculum, that's what it would be. But you're going to be making a tiny URL maker. So a URL shortener. Cool. Get hyped. This is what we code for. Yeah. So have a great rest of the day until 3, when I'm gonna ruin your day with a breakout. Now it's gonna be fun. We'll have a breakout at 3. We'll look at fun JavaScript things. But there's nothing in the breakout that you need to be able to do the assignments for today. The breakout's still important. Like, be there. Any questions? Cool. I'll be mentoring. No, I won't. I'll see you at 3. Yeah. No problem.